what I want to say is that shortly I'll be sharing a very brief mention of trauma that I experienced. But what I want to ask you all to do is to not focus in and of itself on that trauma in the coming 10 minutes, because when you do, you will not then listen to the words that I say. So when I was 17, I was drugged and raped. And every time I say that sentence out loud, I actually cheer a little bit inside my head because of how long it's taken me to say those words. And I share this journey in relation to listening and sharing bravely because the process I've been through is deeply connected to my work and also deeply connected to your work. And I think we can see that from some of the talks that have already happened today. How we listen to or ignore ourselves and others affects all of us every day in every aspect of our lives. And one of the reasons it took me so long to share were the compounding effects of myself and others not listening. So this photo here is of me shortly after my rape occurred. And the weirdest thing when I dug this picture out was that actually I can now see the pain in my own eyes. And what I realized was that actually the reason why it took me so long to acknowledge the trauma within my body and the trauma within my mind around things was because I was not ready to feel the pain, and people around me were not ready to feel and hold that pain either. So instead, I propelled myself into my career. I left school at 18, went straight into work, and there were all of these open wounds that I'd not yet healed. And that came through in my work and how I related to others, whether it was feeling fear in my gut in a way that made absolutely no sense in certain work settings, or desperately needing to be in control of things because of the trauma my body knew from when I hadn't been in control. And this occurs with each of us every single day in big or small ways. We carry these unheard, unspoken, hidden wounds without knowing, and they get triggered or cause us to put up defenses. They affect our conversations, our behaviors, and our decisions. And when discomfort bubbles, even in what might seem to be a mundane conversation, we brush over it without making time to process. As Adrienne Marie Brown says here in this quote, we have to learn to give each other more time to feel and be in our humanity. And something that I've come to terms with over the last few years is that for me, emotions are actually just energy. And this is really important for how we actually listen to one another. Some people do zero of their own processing, whether it's their emotions or other people's. And instead, what they do with that energy is they push or deflect that onto others, often through anger or aggression, which then people have to take and process on their behalf. Or some of us bottle it up and try and keep a lid on that energy, but there's only so much time before that leaks out. On the other hand, you might find yourself doing a hell of a lot of emotional processing on behalf of other people, and you spend so much energy considering others' feelings that you end up with no space to process your own needs and emotions. One of the productive ways that I think we can use our energy around emotions is to grow and change. Listening bravely means being completely open to changing who you are as a result. When I tried to tell my brother about my rape, he told me he wasn't ready to talk to me about it because he thought it would just make him feel guilty. He's still not spoken to me, by the way. And in reality, that's because he's not brave enough. He's not brave enough to have to change and be moved as a result. He'd rather sit comfortably in his innocence. This can often be the same in our work. Do you spend time listening to be moved? Does your team sit in meetings with one another without hearing each other because you think you already know what you need to know? So many of us conduct research with hundreds of people, but still come out with the same results that we originally suspected because we weren't paying attention to everything that was left unsaid. We've all had those times where we think we're listening, but in actual fact, we're bubbling away in our own thoughts. We're rarely listening entirely to the person in front of us. We don't adapt, we don't make space to have relationships in real time. And that was the hardest thing about deciding to share my story, because I knew that people would hold all of these narratives in their heads around rape and victims and trauma. And I knew many people, no matter how clear I was with my story, would hear what they wanted to hear or what they thought they already knew. And this lack of listening and lack of space and understanding for us all to unpack ourselves, our society, and build a better life is what led me to set up Collaborative Future. Sharing bravely in our work is messy because we don't have the words to describe the change that we need to see. Courage is one of Collaborative Future's new organising principles, and courage occurs when you look into an abyss and step into it believing that there is something better on the other side. I often think of my own job as being simply to facilitate mess or hold people through mess, because the mess is needed to build more beautiful and joyful versions of ourselves. When we allow our true selves to be heard and held by others, no matter how messy, we strengthen our relationships, our organisations, and our communities, and we bring life into our work. The most beautiful thing happened when I first told my story, and it wasn't that long ago publicly. A massive weight was lifted, and I was able to lift my head up and truly live. In turn, I found that me sharing helped others to emerge from their own mud and their own mess and stand tall in their own brilliance. In our workplaces, we keep so many things, so many small things hidden or underground for fear of rocking the boat. But when we voice our ideas or problems, or our wildest hopes and fears, we nourish others, we create connection, and we give meaning to our work. From sharing my story and listening to others, I've realised through this simple act of listening and sharing bravely, we find connections that unlock collective power, that unlock movements and energy beyond our imagination. Because really, at the end of the day, the point of listening and sharing bravely each and every day in our work, for me, is about building vibrancy and resonance. I'm just going to pause and read this quote quickly. When you speak, allow the insight of our collective humanity to speak through you. When you're angry, allow your anger to be released and to be embraced by the larger community. Be like the bees and birds that fly together and see yourself in the community and see the community in you. And I think I was so pleased to hear everything that Mama shared in the first talk. For me, resonance within an organisation or community isn't about singing from the same hymn sheet. I absolutely despise that phrase. I think there was mentions of Catholicism, and there's a lot of Catholicism in my family. It's about building together the most beautiful piece of music that has ever existed without having a single clue of what that sounds like yet. It's about the organic ways that we move and grow together, how we build on what we hear, how we amplify each other. You won't find this through drawing roadmaps, through creating spreadsheets, through defining rules or values. You've got to do the daily work of listening deeply, connecting to yourself and to others, being brave enough to be heard and to hear. So yes, for some people, when I shared my story, it seemed brave. But for me, listening and sharing in this way is both the most fundamental practice of being human and the most important and exciting thing we can possibly do. Because when you have that resonance in your team, in your family, in your life, in your work, there is no stopping the flow. So I want to leave you with these thoughts to guide you in your journey towards courage to really listen and be heard. Allow yourself and others to feel. There's lots of practices today that people have shared to sort of slow people down to listen. Find a balance of who processes the energy, take it in turns to hold some of that energy for other people. Be open to change in response to what you hear. Create safety for sharing messy thoughts and messy versions of yourself, and share to give life to yourself and your community and your work. Thank you.